This is San Diego News Network. I'm Rebecca Tolan. The graceful and mighty California condor has been flying the western skies for hundreds of years, but the species almost vanished in the 1980s. Since then, the U.S. government backed a massive recovery program led in part by the San Diego Zoo. Today, there are about 320 birds, some living back in the wild. Michael Wallace is the team leader for the California Condor Recovery Program at the San Diego Zoo. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Well, right now it is actually hatching season for the condors, and there have been about 150 condors that have been hatched since this recovery program began 27 years ago. And I understand you use some pretty creative techniques in the program. How does that work?
Well, we sort of trick the parents to lay more eggs than they would normally lay in the wild, and use those extra eggs. We bring them into incubators, hatch them artificially, and then have condor puppets that look like their parents, and sort of fool them into thinking they're in the wild.
And the chicks actually believe the condor puppets are in fact their parents.
Yes, they groom the chicks, and they act scared if there's a noise, and the puppets definitely react. The chicks definitely react to the puppets as their mom.
Now the goal, of course, is to release them back into the wild, and the zoo, along with other agencies, has been able to do that. Where are the condors now, and how are they faring?
Well, we have release sites in many parts of their former range. So where they used to range down in the Baja, we have a northern Baja release site that we're releasing. We've got 15 birds or so flying there. We have birds up at Big Sur that are actually been released long enough now that some of the birds are old enough to be nesting, and so they're actually nesting in redwood cavities instead of caves in the hills. They're actually in trees. We have birds at Pinnacles National Monument, and then out in the Grand Canyon, the Peregrine Fund is releasing many birds out there as well.
You mentioned Baja California, and just in April, zoo researchers actually found an egg that had been laid in the wild in Mexico, which was significant that it had been laid in the wild rather than captivity. What is the status of that?
We've been releasing birds since 2002 in Baja. And finally, the youngsters are getting old enough. The 5- and 6-year-olds are pairing up and breeding, and they're selecting caves in the very rugged escarpments of the Sierra San Pedro Martir, where they lay their egg, their single egg, in the soft sand of the cave. And finally, we had this year 2 pairs lay eggs. We found the first egg, and we're still searching for the second egg.
So you hope that that's intact.
We hope it's going well. Yeah, the parents seem to be coming and going from the general area in a pattern that would indicate that they've got an egg. So we're hopeful.
Which is a fairly significant turnaround, since the condors almost became extinct at one point due to various reasons, habitat destruction, and then there were some poisons such as DDT, as well as lead bullets, which really still continues to be a threat somewhat today. Why is that?
Well, hunters legitimately go out and shoot game, and some of these animals, the large animals, the deer, wander off into an area if they're not retrieved, if they're not killed outright. And condors are carrion feeders, and so they feed on dead animals, and these animals are going to die sometime, and they're available for the food chain, which the top of the food chain is the condor, and if they ingest a fragment of lead, it's just like children or just like humans. It's poisonous.
Governor Schwarzenegger actually passed a ban on the lead bullets in condor territory in 2007. Is that making a big difference?
We're hoping. We're not seeing the direct evidence yet, but there's bound to be a lag effect. And it just makes sense. There are alternatives to lead bullets out there, and they are just as effective and just as lethal as the lead. And hunters are learning that these are good alternatives. And so
this is actually one of the most expensive species recovery programs in U.S. history. Why is it so important to the U.S. government, to agencies like the San Diego Zoo, and also just to biodiversity that this particular species recovers?
Well, it's a spectacular species. It goes way back in history with our Native Americans, thinking of them as the thunderbird and part of their culture. And when we were talking about bringing the birds into captivity back in the late 1980s, the Native Americans were really distressed because that's how they get to the afterlife, on the wings of the condor. So in their culture, it was a terrible thing to have them all brought into captivity. But we promised them we would do our best to get them out, and within 5 years we were releasing them back to the wild.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael Wallace, for coming in to tell us about those. For more information on the California condor, you can visit sandiegozoo.org or our website, sdnn.com. For San Diego News Network, I'm Rebecca Tolan.